I was sitting at my parents' dining table when my dad dropped the news. The roast beef was still steaming on my plate when he said, "We're taking your office space, Randall." My fork paused midair. Mom nodded along as if they were telling me about the weather. I swallowed hard, thinking about my design business, my clients, my upcoming presentations. "Okay," I heard myself say, "I'll clear it out tomorrow." Before I tell you what happened next, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had family take something important from you without asking. 2 years ago, I quit my corporate design job after working 80-hour weeks left me with severe burnout and a growing hatred for the work I once loved. I was 32, single, and finally ready to launch my own graphic design business. My parents offered their support in the form of my old bedroom, which they had converted into a home office after I moved out in my 20s. I gratefully accepted setting up my desktop dual monitors and grandfather's antique oak desk that he had gifted me when I graduated from design school. This desk has seen 3 generations of hard workers. He had told me his weathered hand, patting the smooth surface. Now it will see a 4th. My grandfather had been my biggest supporter before he passed away 5 years ago. Unlike my parents, he never questioned my creative pursuits or suggested more practical career paths. That office space became my sanctuary. The walls displayed my first professional design award, my college diploma, and framed samples of my best work. The bookshelf housed my collection of design references and the small cactus plants that were the only things I could keep alive. I was sitting at my parents' dining table when my dad dropped the news. The roast beef was still steaming on my plate when he said, "We're taking your office space, Randall." My fork paused midair. Mom nodded along as if they were telling me about the weather. I swallowed hard, thinking about my design business, my clients, my upcoming presentations. "Okay," I heard myself say, "I'll clear it out tomorrow." This contract alone would double my annual income and potentially lead to referrals that could transform my side hustle into the thriving business I had always envisioned. My family situation was complicated, as most are. I was the middle child, sandwiched between my older brother Thomas and younger sister Alicia. Thomas was 36, the golden child who followed our father's footsteps into banking. He wore tailored suits, drove a luxury sedan, lived in a suburb with excellent schools, and had produced 2 grandchildren that my parents adored. Every family gathering included at least 15 minutes dedicated to Thomas's latest promotion or clever investment. Alicia, at 26, was still the baby of the family. She had bounced from college major to college major before graduating with a degree in communications. Since then, she had tried various careers: yoga instructor, social media manager for a boutique personal assistant to a local celebrity, none lasting longer than 6 months. Despite her inconsistency, my parents funded each new venture and welcomed her home between adventures. Her bedroom remained untouched, a shrine to her high school achievements and changing interests. Then there was me, Randall, the middle child, neither the successful firstborn nor the doted-upon baby. I had always existed in the margins of family attention, receiving polite inquiries about that design thing you do, but never the enthusiastic support they showed my siblings. I learned early that proving myself was the only way to gain notice, but even my achievements were often overlooked in favor of Thomas's conventional success or Alicia's latest drama. My parents, Frank and Diana, were not bad people. They provided a stable home, paid for my education, and never actively discouraged my dreams. Their support, however, always carried conditions, unspoken but clearly felt. Success in their eyes required financial stability, home ownership, marriage, and eventually children. My graphic design career was tolerated as a stepping stone to something more secure, not valued as a legitimate path. Sunday dinners at my parents' suburban home were a long-standing tradition that none of us dared to miss. This particular evening had begun like any other. Mom's pot roast with potatoes and carrots, Dad's stories about neighbors, and the familiar undercurrent of family dynamics. The bank is creating a new division, Thomas announced, as he precisely cut his meat. They're considering me to head it up. More responsibility, of course, but the compensation package makes it worthwhile. His wife, Jessica, nodded supportively, her diamond earrings catching the light from the dining room chandelier. "That is wonderful news, honey," Mom exclaimed, reaching across to squeeze his hand. "Your father and I were just saying how quickly you have moved up." Dad beamed with pride. "That is what happens when you apply yourself. Hard work pays off." The conversation shifted as Alicia pushed her food around her plate with dramatic sighs. "Tyler and I broke up," she finally announced, her voice catching for maximum effect. "Oh, sweetheart." Mom immediately shifted her attention. "When did this happen? Are you okay?" Last week, Alicia dabbed at her eyes. "He said he needs space to figure things out. I thought he was the one you know." "There will be other boyfriends," Dad assured her. "You are young and beautiful." I sat quietly eating my dinner and waiting for the obligatory question about my work that would eventually come. It arrived with dessert. "How is your little design business going?" Randall, Mom asked, serving apple pie a la mode. "Actually, it is going really well. I began excited to share my news about the brewery client. I just landed a major contract that could plide." "Speaking of your business," Dad interrupted, setting down his fork with purpose, "we need to talk about that office space." I looked up, caught off guard by his tone. "What about it?" "We're taking your office space," he said, matter-of-factly. "Alicia needs to move back home for a while after this breakup, and she needs her own space to heal." Mom nodded. "You know her old room is too small for her art therapy supplies. She needs room to process her emotions creatively." I glanced at Alicia, who was suddenly very interested in her pie. Thomas raised an eyebrow, but said nothing. "But I have my entire business set up there," I said, hearing the weakness in my own voice. "I have client meetings scheduled next week." "You can work from a coffee shop," Dad suggested dismissively. "Lots of young people do that these days. Or rent a proper office if your hobby is becoming more serious." I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the same feeling I had experienced during confrontations throughout my life. The feeling that speaking up would only make things worse, that maintaining peace was more important than standing my ground. I thought about the brewery presentation scheduled for Tuesday, about my grandfather's desk, about the frame designs that had finally made me feel legitimate. "Okay," I heard myself say, the word escaping before I could stop it. "I will clear it out tomorrow." The drive home to my small apartment that night was filled with anxiety. The brewery client expected professional presentations, not meetings in noisy coffee shops. My apartment barely had room for a bed and couch, let alone a design workspace. I had been planning to look for a proper office space once the brewery contract was completed and paid, but I was not there yet financially. As I drove, I thought of all the times I had yielded to family demands, changing college plans to stay closer to home, when Mom had her health scare, lending Thomas money when he was between jobs despite my own student loans, storing Alicia's excess belongings in my apartment when she decided to try minimalism. Each time I had told myself that family came first, that my needs could wait. By the time I reached my apartment, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles were white. Something had to change, but confrontation had never been my strong suit. I resolved to pack up the office efficiently, find a temporary solution, and maintain family peace while protecting my business. It seemed like a reasonable compromise. I had no idea what awaited me the next morning. I arrived at my parents' house early the next day, coffee in hand, and a stack of empty boxes in my trunk. The plan was to carefully pack my design samples properly, disconnect my computer setup, and find a safe way to transport my grandfather's desk. I figured I could temporarily set up shop in my apartment living room until I found a better solution. The front door was unlocked, so I let myself in. "Mom, Dad, I am here to pack up. I called out, making my way upstairs to the office. What I saw stopped me cold in the doorway. My parents were already in full moving mode. Dad was unscrewing my desktop computer while Mom was pulling books off the shelf and stuffing them haphazardly into garbage bags. My carefully organized design samples were piled in a messy stack, several bent at the corners. And most alarmingly, two of Dad's friends from the neighborhood were attempting to lift my grandfather's desk, carelessly scraping it against the wall. "Hey, wait!" I rushed forward, nearly spilling my coffee. "What are you doing?" I said I would pack everything up. Mom looked up, seeming genuinely confused by my distress. "We thought we would help you start. Alicia is bringing paint samples over this afternoon, so we need to get everything cleared out. You cannot just unplug my computer like that," I said to Dad, who had disconnected cables without shutting down properly. "I have client files open and projects in progress." Dad waved off my concern. "It is fine. Computers these days autosave everything to the cloud." Right, I set down my coffee and rushed to check my computer. The project I had been working on yesterday, the one due for the brewery presentation, had not been properly saved. Hours of work potentially lost because of an improper shutdown. Careful with that desk, I called to the men who were now lifting my grandfather's desk. "That is a family heirloom. It is heavy as hell," one of them grunted. "Where do you want it?" "I was going to arrange professional movers for that," I said, running my hand over a fresh scratch on the desk surface. Mom appeared beside me with a cardboard box labeled "Randall's Stuff" in black marker. Inside, I could see my design awards and framed certificates tossed together like junk. The glass on one frame was cracked. "You are 32 years old," Randall Dad said, wiping his hands on his jeans. "You should have your own place for all this by now. We have been very generous letting you use this space for your side business." Before I could respond, the front door opened and Alicia breezed in carrying shopping bags. "The paint store had the perfect shade of lavender," she announced, then stopped when she saw me. "Oh, hey, Randall. Thanks for giving up your office. This breakup has been so traumatic, and I really need a healing sanctuary." She dropped her bags and began gesturing around the room. "I am thinking of putting my meditation cushion by the window and maybe a small water feature in that corner. Do you think Mom and Dad would let me sage the room? There's a lot of stagnant energy in here." While Alicia continued planning her healing sanctuary, I heard the front door open again. Thomas's voice boomed from downstairs. "Where is everyone?" "Jessica has the kids at her mother's, so I thought I would come supervise the move." "Perfect." Now the whole family was here to witness my displacement. Thomas appeared in the doorway dressed casually, but still somehow looking like he had stepped out of a menswear catalog. "Making progress, I see." "Good. Alicia needs this space more than you do right now, bro." I was trying to salvage my computer situation when my phone rang. It was Mark, my contact at the brewery. "Hey, Mark," I answered, stepping into the hallway for quiet. "What is up? Just checking in about Tuesday's presentation," Mark said. "The CEO decided to join, so we will need extra copies of the mock-ups. Also, can you send over the preliminary files today? The marketing team wants to review them before the meeting." My stomach dropped. The files were on my desktop computer that Dad had just improperly shut down. "Sure thing," I managed to say. "I will get those to you today." After ending the call, I leaned against the wall, trying to steady my breathing. This was quickly becoming a disaster. I needed to get my computer up and running, recover my files, and find a quiet place to work, all while my family dismantled my workspace around me. I headed downstairs to get water and collect myself. As I approached the kitchen, I heard my parents' hushed voices. "We should have told him earlier," Mom was saying. "I feel bad springing it on him like this." "What difference would it have made?" Dad replied. "We promised Alicia months ago that she could have the space when she needed it. Besides, Thomas is right. Randall needs to stand on his own 2 feet. He cannot keep using our house as his office forever." I froze, processing what I had just heard. They had promised my office to Alicia months ago, without telling me. Thomas says Randall is taking advantage. Dad continued. He says real businesses want commercial space. I know Mom sighed, but his little design hobby does seem to keep him busy. I just wish he would get a stable job with benefits like Thomas did. Well, Alicia needs this now. Her art therapy is important for her healing process. The contractor is coming next week to discuss renovating the space, new flooring built-in shelves, for her supplies, maybe even expanding the closet. I backed away from the kitchen, feeling like I had been punched in the stomach. They were planning an expensive renovation for Alicia while dismissing my business as a little hobby. They had never taken me seriously. Not my work, not my goals, not my needs. Back upstairs, Thomas was supervising by pointing out spots the movers had missed while Alicia taped paint samples to the wall. My professional life was literally being boxed up and pushed aside to make room for my sister's latest whim, and it had been planned for months behind my back. My phone buzzed with a text from Mark, looking forward to those files. CEO is excited about your ideas. The pressure of the situation crashed down on me. I had a major client expecting professional work, while my family treated my business like a child's art project. I had hours of work potentially lost because no one bothered to ask before unplugging my computer. And apparently, this had all been decided long ago without anyone thinking I deserved to know. That evening, Mom insisted we all stay for dinner to celebrate Alicia's new beginning. I sat at the same dining table where just yesterday my office had been taken away, picking at my food while my family chatted around me. I was thinking about a crystal shelf near the door, Alicia was saying, scrolling through her phone to show Mom inspiration pictures. And maybe one of those salt lamps for purifying energy. Whatever you need, sweetie, Mom patted her hand. This is going to be your special space. Dad nodded enthusiastically. I talked to Jim at the hardware store about redoing the flooring. He can start next week. And we will get you new furniture. That old desk and bookshelf were just collecting dust anyway. I can help with the furniture costs, Thomas offered, glancing my way. Since Randall probably cannot contribute much with his freelance thing. Throughout this conversation, not once did anyone acknowledge that this special space had been my office until that morning, or that the old desk collecting dust was a treasured gift from our grandfather. It was as if my presence in that room, and perhaps in the family, had been temporary all along, just occupying space, until someone more important needed it. As they continued planning, Mom reached for a framed family photo on the wall shelf behind her to show Alicia a color scheme. It was a picture from my grandfather's last birthday with his arm proudly around my shoulder as I showed him designs on my laptop. The frame slipped from her hand and crashed to the floor, the glass shattering across the hardwood. Something in me shattered along with it. That was Grandpa's favorite photo, I said quietly, my voice somehow cutting through the dinner conversation. Everyone turned to look at me, perhaps surprised I had finally spoken. What did you say, honey? Mom asked, already reaching for the dustpan. I said that was Grandpa's favorite photo, I repeated louder this time. He had it printed and framed himself. He is the only one who ever took my design work seriously. Dad frowned. Now, Randall, that is not fair. We have always supported your creative interests. Have you? I set down my fork with deliberate calm. Because, from where I am sitting, it looks like you have been planning to take away my workspace for months without even telling me. It looks like my business is just a hobby and a freelance thing to all of you, despite the fact that I quit a toxic job to build something of my own. The table fell silent. Thomas cleared his throat. Come on, bro. It is not like that. It is exactly like that, I countered, meeting his eyes directly. Do any of you even know what I do? Do you know that the freelance thing brought in $60,000 last year? That I have 5 regular clients who depend on me for their branding? That I just signed a contract with Northern Brewery that will pay more than your monthly mortgage? Thomas? I pulled up the contract on my phone and slid it across the table. This is the client I have a presentation for on Tuesday. The presentation I have been preparing on the computer Dad unplugged today, potentially losing hours of work. Mom's eyes widened as she glanced at the contract amounts. Randall, we had no idea. You never asked, I said. And that desk you called old furniture collecting dust was Grandpa's gift to me when I graduated. He believed in me even when none of you did. He said that desk had seen 4 generations of hard workers, but I guess that tradition stops here. Alicia looked uncomfortable for the first time. If I had known your business was so important, you would have what I interrupted. Still taken the space, because your breakup is more important than my livelihood, because that is what happened today. My entire professional setup was dismantled without warning for your healing sanctuary, while everyone acted like I should be grateful for the opportunity to start over from scratch. Dad's face had reddened. Now wait just a minute. That is our house, and we can use the rooms however we see fit. We let you use that space as a favor. A favor with an expiration date you never bothered to tell me about. I stood up, hands flat on the table. You know what? You have 24 hours to decide what kind of relationship you want with me going forward. Either you start respecting my business as legitimate work deserving of basic courtesy, or you can enjoy your family dinners without me from now on. Thomas scoffed. Dramatic much. This is the real world, Randall. Sometimes you do not get what you want. Throwing a tantrum will not change that. I looked at each of them. Mom's shocked expression, Dad's defensive posture, Alicia's sudden interest in her plate, and Thomas's smug disapproval. 24 hours, I repeated, picking up the broken picture frame of Grandpa and me. I will be back tomorrow to either finish properly packing my equipment and Grandfather's desk, or to hear that you have reconsidered how you treat me and my work. I walked out of the dining room, the family photo clutched in my hand, leaving stunned silence behind me. That night, I called my best friend Kyle, who immediately offered his living room floor. Bring whatever you need, he said without hesitation. Stay as long as you want. I drove back to my parents' house after everyone had gone to bed and retrieved my computer tower and essential equipment. Working through the night on Kyle's living room floor, I managed to recover most of the brewery files and finish the presentation. As I worked, Kyle brought me coffee and offered an outsider's perspective on my family situation. They have always treated you like the least important sibling, he observed, sitting cross-legged on his couch. And you have always let them. His words stung with truth. I wanted to keep the peace. At what cost, though? Your self-respect, your business. That pattern will not change unless you change it. By sunrise, I had made my decision. Regardless of my family's response, I knew what I needed to do. The next morning, I arrived at my parents' house with a rented moving truck and 3 friends from my design community. Kyle had made some calls, and 2 other designers I knew had shown up with coffee and determination to help. When I pulled into the driveway, I could see the curtains move as someone peeked out. By the time I reached the front door, Mom had opened it, her expression a mix of surprise and concern. Randall, what is all this? She asked, looking at the truck and my friends unloading moving blankets and boxes. I told you I would be back to properly pack my equipment, I said calmly. These are my friends who understand the value of professional design tools. Dad appeared behind her, frowning. You brought strangers to our house. I brought professional colleagues to help me move my business equipment safely. I corrected him. May we come in? They stepped aside wordlessly as we entered. Upstairs, Alicia was sitting on the floor of what had been my office, surrounded by color swatches and home decor magazines. She scrambled to her feet when she saw us. Oh, I did not realize you would bring people, she said, gesturing vaguely at the room. I was just planning some ideas. We will need the space to properly pack everything, I said. Would you mind giving us some room to work? As my friends began carefully wrapping my monitors and organizing cables, Mom pulled me into the hallway. Randall, your father and I talked last night, she began hesitantly. We feel terrible about how things happened yesterday. Maybe we can find another space for Alicia or convert part of the basement for your office. I shook my head. That is not going to work, Mom. My business needs a dedicated professional space where I will not be displaced on someone else's whim. Besides, I have already found a solution. What do you mean? She asked. Kyle introduced me to his friend in commercial real estate, I explained. There is an office space available in the downtown arts district. I signed the lease this morning. Her eyes widened. But that must be expensive. How will you afford that? I am using the savings I had set aside for a house down payment, I said. My business comes first right now. I have made that decision for myself. Dad joined us in the hallway, his expression shifting from irritation to confusion as he overheard our conversation. You signed a lease already. Son, do not be hasty. We can work something out. This is not hasty, I replied. This is long overdue. I should have established a professional space months ago, but I was comfortable here. Too comfortable to see that my business needs were never a priority in this house. As my friends carefully wrapped my grandfather's desk in moving blankets, Dad watched with a newfound awareness. That desk really means a lot to you, does not it? It does, I confirmed. Grandpa believed in me, even when no one else did. He understood that creative work is still work, that design is a profession, not just a hobby. Over the next few hours, we efficiently packed and loaded everything. My friends treated each item with care, understanding the importance of preserving design samples and equipment. Throughout the process, my parents hovered nearby, offering hesitant help and watching with growing realization as the professional nature of my setup became evident. Alicia appeared as we were loading the last boxes. I did not realize how established your business was, she said quietly. I thought it was just something you did for fun. That has been the problem all along, I replied, not unkindly. None of you bothered to find out. By noon, the truck was loaded. I stood in the empty room now, stripped of all evidence of my work. I will see you next Sunday for dinner, I told my surprised parents. We are still family, but things will be different now. The next 48 hours were a blur of activity. My friends helped me move into the new office space, a small but bright studio in a converted warehouse building filled with other creative professionals. The rent would stretch my budget thin until the brewery payment came through. But for the first time, I had a truly professional space that no one could take away. Kyle and the others helped me set up my equipment, restore my grandfather's desk to its place of honor, and hang my framed work on the freshly painted walls. By Monday evening, the space was functional enough to complete my brewery presentation. On Tuesday morning, I welcomed Mark and the brewery executives into my new office. The CEO nodded approvingly as he took in the professional space, and the presentation went flawlessly. By the end of the meeting, they had approved all my designs and discussed the possibility of additional projects. Great space, Mark commented as they were leaving. Very professional setup. Thanks, I replied. It is a recent upgrade. For 2 weeks, I heard nothing from my family, except a few critical texts from Thomas about overreacting and abandoning family. I focused instead on settling into my new office and catching up on work delayed by the move. Then one afternoon, there was a tentative knock on my office door. Mom stood there holding a small plant and looking around with genuine curiosity. "May I come in?" she asked. I welcomed her, offering the client chair, while I leaned against my grandfather's desk. "This is really nice, Randall," she said, taking in the framed designs, the professional equipment, the large windows overlooking the busy street below. I had no idea. This is a real business you have built. "Yes," I said simply. "It is." Her eyes filled with tears. "I am sorry we never took the time to understand. We should have respected your work, asked about your plans, celebrated your successes. We talked for over an hour." For the first time, she asked detailed questions about my clients, my design process, my business goals. She listened without interrupting, without suggesting alternatives, without comparing me to Thomas or worrying about Alicia. "Your father wants to talk to you too," she said as she was leaving. "He is not good with apologies, but he feels terrible. Dad called that evening. Our conversation was awkward, but respectful. He asked about the new office lease, offered advice about business insurance, and mentioned a friend who might need design work for his company. He did not directly apologize, but his effort to engage with my business on its own terms was a start." Most surprisingly, Alicia texted a few days later, "Can I see your new office sometime? I am sorry about everything. I should have asked instead of assuming." Gradually, our family dynamics began to shift. Sunday dinners resumed, but with a different energy. I shared my weekly business wins and challenges, and they actually listened. Thomas still occasionally slipped into condescension, but Mom would quickly redirect the conversation back to my update. My business flourished in its new location. Being surrounded by other creative professionals led to collaborations and referrals. The brewery client was thrilled with the rebrand, and they recommended me to 2 other companies in their network. For the first time, I had to consider hiring an assistant to keep up with the workload. Grandfather's desk, now restored and polished after the moving scratches were repaired, occupied the center of my office. I had the photo of us reframed and hung it where clients could see it, a reminder of the person who had believed in me from the start. The most valuable thing I gained from this experience was not the new office or even the expanding client list. It was learning to establish boundaries with the people I loved. I discovered that respecting myself led others to respect me too. That standing firm did not have to mean cutting ties, and that sometimes the hardest step is refusing to continue unhealthy patterns. Family relationships are complex, messy things. The bonds of blood do not automatically guarantee understanding or support. Sometimes the people who should know us best actually see us least clearly trapped in outdated versions of who we once were rather than who we have become. But change is possible when we refuse to play our assigned roles, when we demand to be seen as we truly are. Have you ever had to reclaim your space, physical or emotional, from family who did not see your value? Drop a comment below sharing your experience. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your worth and standing your ground. Share this video with someone who might need encouragement to establish healthy boundaries. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply to take up the space you deserve.